Greetings, everyone. Today, I'd like to discuss the sources and practices of necromancy. This is Necromancy Part 2. 4 days ago, give or take, I did a video here on YouTube, shared it to Facebook and everything. And kind of discussed necromancy in a wide variety. Basically, talking about what it's about, what you can do with it, some of the tools that were used. But most importantly, I gave a couple of sources of information, book-wise. So today, I'd like to continue with this tradition. And most importantly, I'm going to show you some of the books that I had posted on that other video. But then I'm going to go even further with it today. And I want to show you the different thought forms of necromancy and the practices thereof. All right. Now, last time I mentioned the Black Pullet. Now, the Black Pullet, I did mention and kind of tell you a little bit about it as a source to go to for conjurations through the Salamantic texts. Now, the author of this book, he was an architect, I guess you could say. He was more of one of those kind of archaeologists that go on expeditions. And he found himself in Africa, and he was with a platoon of soldiers where he was attacked. They were attacked by rebels or opposing force, something. And all the soldiers ended up getting killed, and he almost died. But luckily for him, a sorcerer was in the nearby tomb, a nearby pyramid. Came out, opened the door, dragged him in, healed him, and taught him his ways. This book here, as I stated in the last video, discusses the symbolatry utilizing talismans, sigils, stuff like that to conjure spirits and to have them do your work for you, or the willingness to do the work for you. Now, I've discussed necromancy from this book as well. The True Black Magic, and this book here only has a sigil on necromancy. And I'm trying to bring that up right now. There we go. Right here. Page 174, the Sixth Pentacle. And it talks about the angelic being that you would call upon to associate with the dead. The Grimorium Vernum, on the other hand, this book here has quite a few pages on necromancy in itself. Page 7 and page 61 discuss the necromancer. And for necromancing and speaking with the dead, 71 through 73. Okay. So you've got a few good pages in there just talking about summoning the spirits, calling upon the corners, the quarters, getting into the rightful outfits. And I'll get into this in a little while here as well and kind of just walk you through some of the practice and the study and the history of necromancy in that fashion. And then you have the Secrets of Solomon, which, in my opinion, really touched on a lot of different things. But unfortunately, on page 46 was the only page in this book that actually talked about necromancy, and it showed a different glyph, okay? A different sigil. All right? Now, those 4 books, in my opinion, that I've studied, practiced, and worked out of for many, many years was through the Solomantic keys, the clavicle of Solomon, the greater and lesser keys of Solomon, dealing with demons, dealing with spirits, dealing with angelic beings, depending on who he was trying to summon and control. Okay. Now, again, this is a topic that has numerous different aspects, so I want to save that for last. Those books there, and kind of get into these other ones. Now, this next book is the Grimoire for the Apprentice Wizard. Now, those of you who are familiar with my work, I've literally discussed the different topics, the different authors who have discussed different names, such as a sage, a mage, a wizard, a warlock, a witch, a necromancer, a brujo, a polero, stuff like that is just a title that is given to an initiated devotee of a particular path. And sometimes you get into a path like Wicca and Wiccan practices, or that of paganism, where they've gone by the Judeo-Christian point of view of necromancers being evil. So therefore, when you get into a coven situation, the term warlock is given to those who dare to go outside of them against the coven's wishes and go outside of the coven and start learning from various different other sources, styles, and traditions of magic. Okay. And the one thing I liked about Oberon's book, Oberon Zell's book, is that it touches on so many different levels of practice, from the Fae to demonology to angelology to witchcraft, working from a light practitioner's point of view, a green witch's point of view, basically the black and white aspects, dealing of the left-hand path and the right-hand path. And he touches on a lot of different sorcerers and sorcerers, touches on a lot of different types of practices and breaks them down, defining each name. He and his cohorts have really taken the time to break this down into how should I say this? Their respective names. Now, one of the reasons why I picked this book was because it had necromancy in it. And necromancy can be found on page 4, page 26, pages 297 to 299. Okay. And that's this book here. Now, keep in mind, there's also another book called The Companion to this book. Very, very good book, but I'm not going to show that book because it didn't have anything to do with the topic here. Okay. Now, the next book is Phosphorus. This is a book of necromancy, and it's actually based off a much older book that was practiced centuries ago. It's been remodulated, much like a lot of books and a lot of things that we know of today that gets repeated and put into somebody else's words, their own practice, how they associate with them and such like that. Okay. Now, Phosphorus literally, don't want to do that. Johannes Phosphorus kind of brings to the table a unique look on necromancy in this book. Now, this book came out in May 2012. This one here that I've got. And this book is very, very unique, in my opinion, because of the writing. He not only begins his work with the old school cuneiform, medieval Latin type spelling in English and the writing that goes with it, but he actually breaks things down and gets you to think about it. For an example, on page 18, it says, number 1, there is one all-encompassing cosmos, the existence of which is certain, eternal, and unconditional. Of this, there can be no doubt. And there's like 6 different sections to this, 6 different point of views. But when we get into this and we start delving into life and death, good and evil, the duality of the historical accounts that have taken place surrounding necromancy, surrounding witchcraft, surrounding the very arts themselves, from voodoo, depending on the region, if it's African, Haitian, Jamaican, Colombian, Central American, all the way up into New Orleans, New York. And there's even hints that there's actually voodoo not only in LA, but also in Missouri, which I found very, very interesting. And I've been looking into that, but haven't found really much information on any practices of voodoo or voodoo in Missouri. But this book here is a psychological book that is based around black magic, demonolatry, and the practices of necromancy. I really did like that book. I've read it several times since I got it. It really clarifies your point of view and within a point of humbleism, namely because of the fact that not only does it talk about the cosmos, it talks about the solar system. It talks about the planetary systems and the point of views of it. Much like in 1 John chapter 5, verse 7, where it says that there is 3, in verse where it says there are 3 that beareth witness in heaven, and then you have the verse 8, which bears 3 witnesses here on earth. Okay, so right there, you're dealing with the planetary, you're dealing with the solar, and you're dealing with the universal. But what if I told you that you can actually break it down into a multiversal level as well, meaning different dimensions, different divisions, different planes of existence? Okay. There are so many different aspects to astral projection, summoning the dead and such like that, that it's mind-blowing. It's very, very mind-blowing, and I like it. Now, the next 2 books In the last video, I also talked about Necromancy, the Forbidden Art by Lucien Raphael. Okay? That's this book here. Okay? By Lucien. Okay? Lucien breaks it down by region: Egyptian, Greek, European, getting into the actual texts within Buddhism, the many hells, in Asian Buddhism, necromancy from the history from the Greek point of view, necros meaning corpse, and mancy or mancia describing the practice of necromancy. Okay, so this is something that is very, very interesting. But like I said in the last video, there's actually things that are cross-referenced throughout all the books and all the grimoires. The roots of necromancy. This was a very good chapter, and how to do it. And he even touches upon the Hermetics and the Kabbalah point of views, specifically that of the Tree of Life and where necromancy fits in, specifically that of the gods and goddesses. So I do recommend that book and Lucien Raphael to you. The next book is Christian Days, The Witch's Book of the Dead. We've all seen this, okay? And this was actually forwarded by a man that I actually idolized. I wouldn't say I idolized the guy. It was more the fact that I was a huge fan. And Raven Grimassi was one of those kind of guys that wasn't afraid to go against the norm. He was a neo-pagan, and I've touched on this before in other videos and posts, not only here, but also on Facebook. He, like Raymond Buckland, really went against the norm and stuck close to the actual truths. So to see Christian Day's name among this, specifically that of necromancy, voodoo, and stuff like that, is not really surprising, to a lot of practitioners. Now, I've been following Christian Days since he opened up Hex in Salem, Mass. Like Lucien, though, he goes through a lot of the world's mythology, the world's history of necromancy and the practices, the different things from the methods of spirit contact utilizing automatic writing and automisms to pendulums, Ouija boards, and stuff like that. But he also touches on some actual practitioners that have, like Hans Holzer has in his book Witches. He puts forth, let me get to Appendix A here, if I can get to it here. He goes through the different religions as well, kind of like what I've been doing. He goes through the gods of death. You have the Appendix A, which gives an oleum, anointing oil, and that's on page 216. The ingredients, the preparation, and how to go about doing it. I really like this book because it talks a lot about the history and the mythology. He really did an awesome job because Lucien Raphael and Christian Day's work have really backed up what my own studies and practices have been doing within necromancy. Everywhere I've looked, from the Tibetan Book of the Dead to the Egyptian Book of the Dead to the different regions of necromancy and the practices and the myths and the legends of the necromancer, through these regions from, like I said, Egyptian, Greek, Tibet, Asian, even up to German, into European practices, Middle Eastern practice. Okay, really connects with and stays true to the historic, but also historic, mythological and history point of views in this. Now, as I stated in the last video, and this is the last book on that actual ones from the last one is Peter Haining books. Peter Haining, The Necromancers, The Best of Black Magic and Witchcraft, The Necromancers, okay, by Peter Haining. Looks like this, okay? Now, this one's a hardcover book, and this book basically goes anywhere from 70 to 150, sometimes more, depending on where you're looking. And this book here really breaks down the role in the image of a necromancer or in practice. And the thing I liked about this book by Peter Haining is the fact that he, as I said in the last video, he breaks it down. He puts you into that mind frame, much like Lovecraft did in the Necronomicon. When he was trying to spell out these words, when he was trying to write and visualize them, he's putting you as the reader and the potential practitioner into that same frame of mind. So you're imagining, you're seeing it in your third eye. Okay, you're visualizing it in your mind, on each step by step, like going through a blackened forest at night, going from village to village or city to city. Think of it from, say, for example, going from one end of the Appalachian Trail to the other. Okay. Now, of course, we all know that there are splinter cells of paths that lead you out of that region. Okay. But for the most part, people have been known to spend days walking the Appalachian Trail, just hiking it, camping out. They bring enough food and everything and water and stuff like that, just to commune with nature. But what would happen if you're strolling through, just continuing walking, and you hear all of a sudden there's no animal noises, no nothing. It's just dead silence. And all of a sudden, you're hearing singing, dancing, like a village is up ahead or just off to the side. So you go to investigate and you see people performing some form of ritual. Okay. Now, what if you didn't find those noises? What if you didn't see the people dancing around a bonfire with masks on, with hoods and cloaks like we have today? What if you went with the Judeo-Christian point of view of the Dark Ages, where every creak and cranny, every noise in the world, that forest, was a possible demon, a possible mugger, a possible death omen, like an animal getting ready to pounce on you. And you dubbed it Satan. You dubbed it from the Hebrew term, the adversary, or the Islamic view of opposer. He who opposes, the tempter in Jewish mythology. The traditions of Satan and how the imagery came together of the devil is the exact same way. You have to go through history and you have to put yourself into that mind frame of how those modern day priests or practitioners, the very peasants and the charlatans, feared for their life back in those days. This book is one of the best well-written books on necromancy and black magic. Now, let's get into some other works. Okay. Now, in the last video, I discussed Francis Barrett's The Magus. Okay. Eliphas Levi, Doctrine and Ritual of High Magic. And this one here is the new translation by him, and it's very, very awesome. Now, when we get into the necromantic works in this book, when I first read this book, I was kind of hesitant to get into it because a lot of this stuff has been watered down. A lot of this stuff has been corrupted by the names of God, the Hermetic and the Kabbalah aspects. It's really been influenced there. But after thinking about it and actually getting into the studies and the practices, taking the notes, you really tend to understand where Eliphas Levi came from. And let me see here. Necromancy is found on page 124 through 31, page 145, page 217, page 296 to page 307. And when you get into this, you can also get into page 305 to page 307, which describes the black arts or the dark uses of necromancy and how it was viewed. And then you can get into page 299, which discusses the types of necromancy. Okay. Now, the thing I liked about when I was reading this book and the works on necromancy in itself was the man who was invited by a clear widow, or perhaps a widow of high standing within the court, okay, or within social status, that was possibly into the necromancy on a massive level, that challenged him to perform an actual rite to prove that he was worthy to be there, okay, to be an actual practicing member of that society that she belonged to. Much like a coven status where you have to earn your keep. Okay. Anyone who goes on a camping trip knows that you have to learn to trust each other. When you go into a compound of a religious belief structure, such as Waco, that have armed guards, which have fencing, which has barbed wire fence keeping people out, and armed guards and stuff like that. Or you get into like such an organization that's so hardcore and considered to be a cult in itself, and a patron and daughter of a family that actually belongs there, who happens to be Rose McGowan, the actress. Okay. And you can actually look this up yourself on Google and right on YouTube, right here on YouTube as well. As she clearly called it a cult, a Christian cult. And it was interesting to note that in some of these compounds, they basically are nothing more than criminal organizations. But in some cases, it is more like a family, much like Charles Manson and his family. Okay. Now, Charles Manson is still today associated with the Church of Satan, even though he had been kicked out. His belief structure was way too extreme for what Anton and the COS was trying to do. So again, you're seeing how imagery can play a huge role here, specifically that of necromancy. Okay. And Eliphas Levi called upon a former necromancer. And it was very interesting to note that the effects, he didn't contact that particular spirit. He ended up contacting a different spirit that just simply laid a hand on his arm, and his arm went numb. It went numb and was painful for days after. It was the exhaustion factor that played a huge part in it, but he never really went back into that necromantic practice of Solomantic. But he did go into a new structure based off the Kabbalah, the Hermeneutics. And he goes through a lot of that right in this book of how to press, how to, how to press, how to dress, how to prepare yourself mentally and emotionally, what type of tools you're going to need, okay? And all that stuff right in this one book. And I really liked that book because of that. He really showed a whole new variation of necromancy. Not from the works that came before them, from an actual coven setting, an actual individual setting and practice setting of fear and discrimination, biasness even. But in this case, they're actually associating the names of God with the tree of life, but from the Kabbalah and Kabbalistic aspects, which was very, very fascinating to me. Now, Francis Barrett, on the other hand, The Magus, A Complete System of Occult Philosophy. This book here, however, really goes into the necromantic aspects of how he viewed necromancy as being a chilling aspect of evocation. Both of these authors, Eliphas Levi and Francis Barrett, literally brought it into evocation, conjuration even, how to conjure them, how to bring them forth, how to summon them, what time of year to summon them. The angels of the summer, the angels of the spring, the fall, autumn, winter, yada, yada, yada. The different elementals, the different workings, conjurations of the week, the utilization of signs and symbols, glyphs like the circle of power encased with some gold, perhaps some bronze. The triangle of evocation, the hidden languages, the spirits' names, who they wanted to summon, and so forth. Even down to demonolatry like Belial, Beelzebub, Astaroth even. And I found that very, very interesting because the more I get into necromancy, the more I delve into it. Now, keep in mind, I've been studying the Cabal workings on necromancy and all their books by Sumner Redwood. I've been communing with a little bit off and on with Marcus, who does videos right here on YouTube. I love his videos. I love his works and what he's putting forth. But I've really begun to get really, really delved, really, really excited about it, because the more I study it, the more I get into the Blighten Lords, the more I get into the spiritual workings, the rituals, seeing the history, the mythologies, the different perceptions of what necromancy is. Really, really was exciting, and I'm going to touch on some of Dreadwood's books here in just a few minutes once I go through these other books. Now, a lot of my research into necromancy really led me into, like I said, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the which I have right up here. I've got both books. Plus, I've got a documentary type book from an archaeologist right up here. You'll see the green books right here, and then this book right here. Very, very good books. Really delved into the Egyptian Book of the Dead, from the history of it to the workings and the hidden mechanics. Very, very fascinating. And I've come across several sources of information that talk about necromancy. For an example, these next two books are the exact same book. Okay. Now, this is a small variation called The Grand Grimoire. Okay. Now, this book here has probably about 2 or 3 pages max on the Philosopher's Stone, how to make a divining rod, how to the magic secret or the art of speaking with the dead. Okay. To conjuring and dismissal of a spirit to whom the pact is made. Okay, dealing with Lucifer's Raphael. Okay, the pact maker and scribe of the underworld. Okay, most loyal brother and patron to Lucifer, son of the morning, the archangel. Okay, but it wasn't until I came across in my studies, I was going through satanic books, and I was really back in my early satanic days, back when I was first getting into Satanism. And like everyone else, I ended up in the Church of Satan type aspects, their thrall, their point of view of Satanism, specifically that of Anton Zandelavay. And Anton Zandelavay's work is spectacular. I love the way he writes, the way he expresses his personal belief structure within Satanism, his form of devil worship. And his essays are magnificent. The Devil's Notebook, Satan Speaks, The Secret Life of a Satanist, how he went through, he aligned himself with the death energies, and many different sources, specifically that of Sorceress Cagliostro, the necromancer and blood sorceress, literally discusses aligning themselves with the death energies. The Cabal literally discusses walking through graveyards, getting to know the death energies. In witchcraft, when you're talking about communing with spirits, specifically that of the nocturnal, they recommend that you walk in a cemetery. Feel the nocturnal light of the moon coming down on you. Feel the energy coming up from the graveyard. Okay. Really aligning yourself with that. And that's one of the reasons why so many practitioners, align themselves with graveyards and cursing and hexing. E.A. Coetting, for an example, literally puts forth a curse where he uses chicken feet, a spirit box, and everything, and does this one curse that he claims is so heinous. Now, personally, I've never seen the curse in action, so I can't really speak to it. But just from what he has said in this video, literally describes something that plants your enemy's feet to the ground firmly and starts wearing them out from the inside out, kind of rotting them from the inside out, which goes a lot with what my research into necromancy has actually dubbed the Da'ath energy, the harmful or baneful effects. They can become quite painful to the practitioner. How it came into vampiric practices, how it came into blood sorcery. Okay, three different spellings of it. The Ni, as in nigromancy, or the nigromancy spelled with a Y, to the more modern day spelling of necromancy being associated with corpses and the practices of working the dead, and how the imagery is played into this effect. Okay, now this book, The Grand Grimoire, The Red Dragon, really has a lot of pages in here. And I finally got my hands on this a few years back. And I can see why it's so potent and why it was so many different grimoires literally, should I say this, literally recommended it. I always associated it with demonolatry, making pacts, making deals with spirits and demons. But to actually see its applications within necromancy on a professional level really played a huge, huge part in my research and everything into necromancy. And but unlike the Grand Grimoire, this book here not only goes into, let me go over here, the particular offices, such as Lucifer, the Emperor, Beelzebub, the Prince, Astaroth, my patron. Okay. You'll notice on my arm, if I can get the computer right, Astaroth. Okay. Down to the Prime Minister, Lucifer, Santanisha, or Satan Achia, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Some names are pretty hard to pronounce, so you got to try to use almost like the old high school method of a syllabus, break it down type thing. The Grand General, Aguileret, the General, the Keeper of the Infernal Secrets, the Secrets of the Tomes, the Infernal Library. Fluority, the Lieutenant General. Okay, to Nibiros, the Camp Marshal. And then you have all the 18 spirits that are beneath them, such as Elagor, Nibiris, Leroy, Belial, Agares, Marbus, Ammon, Barbatos, and such like that. But also, it literally goes into the research of what they can do for you, especially with bringing in riches and finding hidden treasures, to spiritual conjurations, and which is one of the type of necromancy and the outlooks of necromancy, where it's called forth to commune with a spirit, to ask them a particular question, a divining question, to telling the past, present, and future. Okay, so many grimoires speak just on this, and a lot of these are tied to the Goetia done by King Solomon. Okay, David's son in the Bible. But you can also see where it goes into the 70, the 72 demons of the Goetia and such. Now, as for the next couple of books, remember, I mentioned Sorceress Cagliostro. Hell of a woman. I've had a conversation with her personally through Messenger. You know, I've actually been keeping tabs on her radio station, her personal blog, right here on YouTube. She's also got one on Facebook. Love this woman's work, how she aligns herself with death, how necromancers literally align themselves with jobs that include the dying and the dead, such as doctors, medical field, CNAs, because it's a CNA who normally sits next to the elderly when they're passing on. Okay. Down to working in a mortuary, a funeral home, being a grave digger, to being some form of, maybe the hearse driver, where you get to drive the body around. Perhaps the caretaker, okay? Surrounded, because the caretaker is the kind of guy that takes care of the graveyard. Their job is to mow, to keep it trimmed up, to keep the place looking nice and respectful to the dead, but also to the families who come to visit their loved ones. Now, Blood Sorcery Bible, Volume 1, Rituals in Necromancy, a treatment on the science of blood and magnetics as they pertain to blood sorcery and necromancy, by sorceress Cagliostro, the Necromancer. Volume 1. Blood Sorcery Bible, Volume 2, Striking the Target, the Practitioner, and the Static Practice Iron Blood Magnetics, by Sorceress Cagliostro, the Blood Sorceress Necromancer, in the hands of 9. Very good books. Okay. These are both done by Sorceress Cagliostro. Now, both of these books literally discuss the magnetics and what a necromancer is, what they can do when they get their hands on, say, for an example, a lock of hair, a photograph, perhaps your bodily fluids, fingernail clippings, stuff like that. Through cursing and hexing, to working with spirits such as the Demerge. Putting yourself into these rituals involving scrying, forms of divination. In the last video, I mentioned the black scrying mirror, a divination bowl, a crystal ball, even pendulum. Okay, to a simple deck of tarot cards. Okay, this is Donald Tyson's deck of the Necromancy deck. Very good deck. I have chose this one for the necromantic practices because of the fact that in calling upon the dead, it helps to have a deck associated with the deck. Like, for an example, the Ian Daniels deck, the vampire deck, is associated with emotion. The Celtic Oracle Wisdom deck is considered to be more logical. The Fallen Angel or the Demonic deck is associated with spiritual. Okay, so you have a deck for just about every occasion. Personally, I have like 8 or 9 decks of tarot cards, 2 decks of runes. I've got the Witch's runes and the Norse runes, and then I have a lot of divination context. Okay, such as 2 Ouija boards, scrying bowl, two crystal balls, the Hand of Glory. Well, actually, it used to be the Hand of Glory before part of it broke because it fell off the stand. So I got to order a new one. But anyways, to pyromancy, hydromancy, chiromancy, even, geomancy, necromancy, the 7 forbidden arts. A lot of these practices were banned because of their association with necromancy and what it can actually do for the practitioner. Sorceress Cagliostro goes into the medical perceptions, okay? How to draw the blood in from where, how to strengthen your own body, okay, through blood magnetics, certain rituals, okay? Very, very good work. She even has 20 pages in volume 1 on medical procedures. She breaks down necromancy and how she got into necromancy, how she connected to the actual practices of death energies and necromantic workings. Incredible. You have to get the books to understand what I'm talking about, to read them. And now this last book, well, actually, I've got like 4 books more, but let me go into this real fast. Claire Fanger wrote a book called Magic and History, Conjuring Spirits. Texts and traditions of medieval ritual magic. Okay? This book surrounds the Book of Angels, text and translations, down to the various different grimoires, from the grimoire of Pope Honorius, the Clavicle of Solomon, even. Okay, there's like 4 or 5, even the Black Raven, but is more, how should I say this? The more logical, takes it from a skeptic's point of view. Talks about the different grimoires from the Ars Notoria to John Dee and the plundering the Egyptian treasure, John the Monk's Book of Visions, and its relation to the Ars Notoria of Solomon, down to actual divining exercises. Now, I know the writing's way too small for you to see, so you'd actually have to go out and get the book to understand. These are just prayers that were spoken, down to literal discussions of different beliefs, from the Vatican, the Virgin Mary, to Jesus Christ, to Nicholas Remy, the errors about the art of magic, astrology, the Sworn Book. There's so much information in this book just on necromancy and spiritual conjurations that you have to have the book to understand. So I do recommend this book if you want to get into necromancy, blood sorcery, vampiric acts, and everything. And then the next one is called Forbidden Rites, a necromancer's manual of the 15th century. Now, this book here was actually originally known as the Munich Handbook, the Munich manuscripts, dating all the way back to the late Dark Ages, early, I want to say 11th, 12th, and 13th centuries era. And this is actually done by Richard Kakeffer. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his last name right, but it's right there. Okay? And this is what it looks like. This book just sticks to the main grimoires that are followed and favored. And the experimentation of banquets, horses, and castle illusionists type stuff, like Chris Angel. Some of the world's greatest illusionists have touched upon this. The Munich Handbook, necromancy and necromancers in the 15th century Munich, to different eras in the world, to the very practices. This book you have to also get. Now, the last two book, that book and the one before it, run roughly around $40 on eBay and Amazon. So keep that in mind. You're going to be paying about that much. With I think mine came to almost, what was it? With shipping and handling came to like 45 something. And that's just from wherever the store was that they shipped it from to where I live. Okay. Now, the last book that I'm going to discuss before I get into the Cabal workings is Richard Cavendish, The Black Arts. This book, I have all three editions, the first, second, and third edition. This book here is the first edition. Okay. I love this book. I love reading it because of the fact that it literally goes into numerology, it goes into astrology, the zodiacs, it goes into the Hermetics, it goes into the Kabbalah aspects, it goes into various different belief structures, and the Kabbalah and the names of power, for an example, to the different types of writings. But most importantly, it goes through the authors of necromancy and black magicians. Okay. And he was very, very thorough. And I didn't realize it at the time when I bought these books. But necromancy is one of the topics in here. Necromancy is found on page 267, 268, 270, and the spheres of necromancy, which I found very, very fascinating and useful, by the way, is on pages 84 and 85. And I'm going to show you these pages, by the way, just so you know, 84 and 85. Okay. You notice that's page 87 right there, the Tree of Life. Okay. But the one before it has the information that you're looking for. The two 84, 85, and 86 literally break down the belief structure and how numerology is seen and played into it. For an example, the number 9 is associated with life and the living, the inspiration to live again. The form in Latin is known as memento mori. Remember that we must die. Okay, but further translation into it goes into stating that it's inspiration so that we may have inspiration to live again. Okay, so it's remember that we must die so that we may have inspiration to live again. Okay, this is why a lot of serious occultists, a lot of sorcerers, black magicians will tell you that just because you've been in it for a number of years doesn't make you a master. Yes, you've gained a lot of knowledge, a lot of expertise in the field that speaks to you as an individual, but keep in mind there's so much more that you don't know. Okay. Now, this book also deals with demonolatry and the past of it. And one of the things that I found inspirational about the Black Arts by Richard Cavendish is he breaks it down into simplistic meanings. Not like some of these more modern day occultists who feel the need to go on and use big, Denison type words such as medical terminology. It's like not all of us have gone to medical school, and have the ability to pronounce these big ass freaking words. You know what I'm saying? So, and it's the same way when you're utilizing all these major words. Not everybody is up to date on all these words. I mean, just because they went to high school and graduated, you got to remember that some people didn't even graduate from high school. Not everybody goes to college either. So you got to take that into consideration as well. And Richard Cavendish did an excellent job of breaking it down, telling it the way it is. His work just on necromancy alone is insightful, and it backs up all these other grimoires. But these next two books and the last two books that I'm going to be showing to you before I start talking about the rituals and stuff is Charnel Whispers by Sumnus Dreadwood. Mastery of Necromancy, Death and Undeath. And the next one is called The Black Scriptures, the foundational rituals of the Majorgeran magic by Sumnus Dreadwood. Okay, and it looks like this. Okay. These two books are two of the most potent informational books that I've ever come across. Practice-wise, I should say. The reason for this is, when I was talking to Marcus, who does videos right here on YouTube, and he runs a couple of groups, from what I understand, on Facebook, he even wrote some things in the books himself. Not all the workings in here were from Sumnus Dreadwood, but they've been in the Cabal's hands since the 13th century, if not before that, depending on who you ask. They've remained pure within their research, within their dedication to the mystics, the magics, the sorceries. And that's one of the reasons I like these books by Sumnus Dreadwood. They remind me a lot of Frank White from the Grail of the Serpents. Frank is one of those kind of guys that is so down to earth that he makes time to offer his services to those who are not adequately acquainted with the arts. But most importantly, he shows the arts the way it is. He tells it the way it is. Much like Raven Grimassi. And I really like that. I really do. It's very inspirational. But these two books here, I would recommend that you get all the books by Sumnus Dreadwood. You have the Cabal. Because you'd have to actually read all of them and break them down, study them, learn the different towers, the beings that are connected to each tower, and the Blighting Lords that rule over them. You really have to learn the different dimensions, the different levels, the different spirits, and really break it down into the actual workings before delving into the rituals themselves. Now, personally, out of the Rites of the 13 Tongues, I've probably done about 4 rituals out of that entire book. Not because I'm afraid to do it. It's more of the fact that I've only been studying the Cabal, like I said, for about 6-7 months now. Okay. And it's been a couple of months that I've really delved into the sorceries of necromancy. Now, keep in mind that it's also been over 10 years since I delved into necromancy. So to refer to yourself as a necromancer is if you're literally aligning yourself with the Daath energies, if you're aligning yourselves with the Lords, Ladies of Death, such as Kali, Shiva, getting into, say, for example, Anubis, Hecate, Hell, just to name a few. Worldwide, there are a number of different belief structures of gods and goddesses of both the celestial and that of the polar opposite, death, life and death. Blood sorcery, in my own research over the last few years, have been really beneficial. And this is where I'm going to start getting into my own personal belief structure here, because of the fact that when I first started getting into blood sorcery through demonolatry, it was after I had been spending a lot of time in my ritual room, my altar room, and I heard a voice say, "Spill blood on the altar." So I did. It took me a few days because I wanted to contemplate on what was said, what was heard. I wanted to write it down in my grimoire and kind of just contemplate on it. But why would a spirit tell me to bleed on the altar? I didn't quite understand that. Being a spiritual or traditional Satanist, a theistic Satanist, if you wish, I believe that Satan and Lucifer are very real. You know, Satan being the witch father, the father of the witches, much like Mephistopheles, or M, as he's so commonly referred to these days within Hollywood's produced films, to that of Lucifer, the morning star, the emperor, the Lord, the fallen angel himself, the beast, as he's referred to. The different realms and the different regions of necromancy are spectacular. You see one of two forms within both, which is about every single method that's out there. Being, and I'm going to quote this, the first being the chiromancy aspects of summoning or conjuring the spirit. Okay, summoning the spirit for divine purposes of foretelling the past, present, and future, or that of simply asking the spirit a specific question. Okay, look at the Grand Grim War. Look at all the depictions of black magic. When you go underneath Google and you type in black magic, demonic sorceries, or that of the religious belief structure of black magic, you're going to see a minister, a Roman monk with an apprentice standing inside of a circle. You're going to see a triangle in front of them with a spirit, a pale spirit, a see-through spirit type thing, with a bag, a gris bag of smelly herbs and plants at that spirit's feet. Okay, that's to summon them, to attract them. But 9 times out of 10, this is the image that people relate to when it comes to black magic or to necromantic rituals. Okay? And the more you delve into it, the more you get into the ritual workings, you're seeing the truth. When I first started out, I started out in Gothcraft and didn't realize why. I related mostly because of my demeanor. I was always cold and distant, lacking the emotional connectiveness, I guess you can call it. The connecting through emotion to people. I was more interested in my own world than in hanging out in cemeteries, doing research, playing on my phone, Googling things. I wasn't the typical kid, I mean, yeah, I went out and rode my bike and all that stuff. But when I went by cemeteries, I always rode my bike in the cemetery. I liked it. I just liked that atmosphere, and I didn't know why. So when I first got into Gothcraft, I always related to the vampiric practices. And that was before I delved into witchcraft and Satanism. And then went into demonolatry and went into various different other belief structures such as voodooism, hoodooism, Santa Muerte, La Santa Muerte, getting into Quimbanda, Ambanda, Palo, Santeria, Druidism, okay, even getting involved with the gypsy craft, becoming a part and members of groups that associate with various different types of magic and sorceries. This is where this led me into. So here I am on my 29th year of being a practitioner. And last year, my brother and I were sitting there talking, and we ended up, I bought him the rest of the books that he was missing from Sumner Streadwood's collection that he has put out. And he and I were talking about spiritualism and the potent effects of what these rites and rituals can do. Now, I've been up to this point, the only ritual that I had actually performed out of the rites of the 13 tongues was the arcane eternal shield using an object of iron, okay, pure silver. And I noticed a lot of that drama, a lot of that chaos just faded away into the darkness, didn't really, all that hostility, all that stuff just vanished in just a few days. And I was sitting there talking with my brother one night, and he ended up doing this cleansing type thing, putting up these warding symbols, which I'm planning on doing around my place, so soon. But it was interesting because he shot me a message the following day. It was still early in the morning, and he says, "Jesus Christ, I've rearranged these things about 3 or 4 different times. It seemed to work at the beginning, and all of a sudden, bam, the spirit was back. And all that last time, I must have did something right because it was a hell of a freaking ruckus." He says the one that was attacking him, that attacking leech type spirit, literally just ran out. All car alarms were going off, he said. But yet nobody in the neighborhood even heard this ruckus. Nobody even heard the alarms going off, the crashing, the banging. I mean, anybody in an apartment complex or living next door to somebody, if you hear a gunshot, you're going to hear the gunshot if somebody fires that gun. If you hear the crashing and banging of somebody fighting, you're going to be hearing the tone in their voice from next door into your own place. Okay? This is what I'm talking about. When you're communing with these spirits, you're communing with these beings, not everything is apparent. Not everything is up front. Sometimes you have to experiment. Whereas other times you just simply follow the leads, the sources, going back and back and back until you hit a more potent version of it. Okay? Now, in my brother's case, nobody heard this. Nobody heard this. And he slept well. And a lot of shit came to pass. A lot of things disappeared, from his life. He ended up getting a new job, new set of works. He ended up currently, he's kind of moving around right now. So, I mean, he's kind of going to a different location because he's having an issue with his current residence and the owner of that residence. So I'm not going to get into that. That's personal between him and his landlord. But my point is, when you're in the difference between the waking realm or that of reality, the ethereal realm, the earthly plane of existence, our realm, in that of your altar room, your altar space, or the ritual chamber, being in indoors or outdoors, being in a cave, someplace sheltered and secluded, to being in your own apartment and having your own home and having a room dedicated specifically to those beings, is you can commune with a spirit. And they have so many different methods that they can commune with you about. For an example, I had 3 people in the room with me one night. There was 4 of us in there total. One was sitting right next to the altar. One was praying next to me, repeating what I was saying. Another one stood there as a skeptic. They felt the entire atmosphere change when I began calling upon the quarters, when I started calling upon the demonic orders, when I started calling upon the spirits themselves. Okay? When I started doing this, the entire atmosphere changed. The entire room started heating up. And you can tell where the gates were opening. Okay? But most importantly, the one that was closest to the altar suddenly had an image come into her mind. She heard a voice. No one else heard the voice. No one else saw what she saw. Each individual literally had their own experience within that altar room. So when you get somebody that wants a ritual done, a lot of individuals expect it to be apparent and immediate. They forget that time and space does not exist in the spiritual realms. In one realm, it could be moving faster. In another realm, it could be moving slower. A prime example of this, and I'm gonna pick on a couple of things of Hollywood produced films. The first one is Lucifer season 1, near the end of the season, when Lucifer makes a deal with his father, God. Okay, and he's laying there bleeding because he's around the detective, and most importantly, he's scared for her. So he's willing to sacrifice his own ego. He's willing to sacrifice everything to save Chloe. So his father does that little flip thing of the sands of time, and he ends up back in hell for a couple of moments. It's snowing. He's walking through a clearly distorted, vision type thing. And he clearly states in season 2 where time moves faster there. It moves different there. Now, if we go into, say, let's go with Thor, the the God of Lightning, the Avengers movies. When we think of Thor, the first movie compared to the second movie, when he brings Natalie Portman's character to Asgard, the Asgardian realm. Okay, we see also here why did she not become a goddess? Why did she not become invulnerable? Why did she not become a god? She just stepped into a whole nother realm, another part of the galaxy even. But then we see where the story comes from all the followers of Thor, from his brother Loki, who originally came from the Frost Giants planet, or the planet of the Frost Giants, to that of the Amazonian type woman played by what's her name there? Alexandria, something or other. Something Alexander. Oh, Jamie Alexander. There we go. Okay. Who comes from another realm, another, planet, and have come together to serve Asgard and to dedicate their lives to the path working of Norse mythology. Okay. And how they're protectors of the realms, the 9 realms. Okay. So right there, you see the protectors of the realms of life. Okay, but when you get into the dark elven, okay, the Fey world, okay, the traditions of the Fey. Here we see where the dark elves associate death and darkness. Okay, so this is where the other half of necromancy comes into play, where it's the reanimation of a corpse, guiding a spirit back to their corpse. And how cemeteries, when we think of voodoo, why do they always set up shop? The voodoo priests and priestesses of bokos and bokors within voodoo and hoodooism. Why do they set up in vacant warehouses? Why do they set up shop in cemeteries? Like say, for an example, the cathedrals. The vacant churches. Why are these rites done on in these areas? You know what I'm saying? It's for necromantic rites because they're utilizing prayer. They're utilizing herbalism, alchemy, even necromancy, chiromancy. They're utilizing all the elements of nature to not only to take life but to create it. And in this case, they're guiding the apparition back into a body to where they can commune. This is associated, as I said in the last video, with zombies, the golems, vampires, ghouls, lycanthrope. Okay. Go into legion, for we are many. Okay. Type atmosphere. Okay. Many beings can make up one. Frankenstein's monster, you know, created by Dr. Frankenstein. Okay. Same thing applies. Death becoming life. Okay. So you see where all this goes into play. So when we get into the necromantic rituals and the rites, much of my research and much of the practices that I've come across on a serious, dedicated working path of necromancy from a traditional satanic point of view, in a belief, a physical belief in the magic, a physical belief in Lucifer and Satan and the demons and their will being put forth and manifested here. Working with the spiritual realms. You're already doing necromancy. You just haven't delved into the actual necromantic path workings yet. So when we delve into this, we're seeing the two aspects of necromancy, the spiritual conjuration and that of the rejuvenation of a corpse. Okay. And what's ironic is that once you get into some of Dredwood's books, get into the Tower of Atropy. Okay, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. It's much like a trophy to me, just without the T. And it's ironic because the more you delve into the four towers, the Tower of Umbra, the Tower of Atropy, the Tower of what is it? Melodies, the Tower of the Stars. You're seeing a much bigger and broader picture of where all of this comes into play, from cursing, hexing, the land of pain, to that of working with the dead, the undead, and the reanimated dead. You're working with hexes and cursing, hexcraft, and dealing with the gods and goddesses of these planes, dealing with the Karaktis aspects. Getting into the old languages, such as working with, for an example, Zazazel's master seal, which is very potent, by the way. I actually drew this out and started working with him, calling him forth. Was very, very potent. I mean, I was watching my candles go nuts. The incense smoke was going nuts just by calling on him. And it's like, damn, you can tell he's got power. And it's funny because the fact is, well, I wouldn't call it funny, but it's still amusing. Even after all these years of conjuring and doing evocations and invocations, with angels and demons, the jinn, and and spirits. You see how where there's no wind, no airflow, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, only one candle goes nuts. The incense will suddenly just head towards a figure, take shape. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of this is very, very fascinating and potent magic. I can see why Marcus said point blank that the magic of the Cabal has been kept pure throughout since its beginning, meaning that all the sorcerers dedicated to firing back against the Inquisition with their tools of their trade as a weapon kept it pure. This is where white candles come into play, in my opinion, because white resembles purity, celestial. Black is death and deals with the ether. Okay. Red candles equal passion, desire, rage, hate, the raw emotion of things. Blue is healing, you know. Green is money. You see where I'm going with this? Each candle, and I can see why in voodooism and hoodooism, Santeria and Palo Mayombe, they deal with so many different candle types. I can see why Christians and the Judo-Christian, foundations have worked solely with white candles or that yellow type white candles. That the creamy white is what I believe they're called, is associated with angelic purity, the celestial realms, like Lucifer. Okay. And I find it so fascinating because each time I delve into the mystics and the magics, get into these areas, these belief structures, delving into the different regions and the different gods, Supe and Inca, Anubis, Egyptian, Hades, Greek, getting into hell, Norse, getting into Hecate, and Greek, going back into the old scriptures of Sumerian and Babylonian. You have Inanna, Nana. You have Lilith, Lilitu, Quilalitu, Quim. You know what I'm saying? You got all these gods and goddesses of death and destruction from Tiamat in the Necromancy, and you're going right back in history. So you're seeing where all these gods and goddesses are. In the ancient Greek, you have the two brothers, one born of light, known as the bearer of light. You have the other of darkness, bearer of darkness. Asenath Mason actually speaks of this within the draconian magic. Getting into the rites of Lucifer. Very, very fascinating works in the histories. Very, very, very awesome, potent works there, and I'd recommend them as well. But since this video is on necromancy, I want to keep it towards necromancy. Now, keep in mind that there are also demons of necromancy out there that you can get into, and I'll get into that probably in a few days once I get into the actual practice. So, yeah, there's a lot of different outlooks of necromancy and necromantic practices that you can get into and delve into. I recommend that you do so and get into the sources and get into the actual works. So the references here are the ones that I showed you here, the books. But also, I would recommend that you get into looking into the Codex Gigas, also known as the Devil's Bible, written by a monk who made a pact with the devil. Back in the 2nd century, he was known as a monk of the Order of the Black Robe. Get into the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Look into the hells, in Buddhism. Buddhism, a lot of Buddhists, depending on where you are, don't really believe in a physical hell. They believe solely in karmatic aspects, the beads and stuff like that. But When you get into Asian Buddhism, they believe in multiple hells that you can belong to. This kind of just backs up what was it, season 3 of episode 1 of or I should say seasons 1 through 3, or you can go into seasons 1 through 7, of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, starring Sarah Michelle Gellar, David Benandez, Allison Hannigan, you know, the guy that plays Rupert Giles. Getting into these works, you can see where it backs up the different types of hells. Get into Dante's Inferno and you see where there's 13 layers of hell, each one worse than the last. Get into the show Angel and you see where there's multiple dimensions and how some of them are so dark that you don't want to get into. You get into the actual practice and mythologies and you can delve into the different layers of hell. The Shadow Realm has multiple different levels. Celestial, the 9 choirs of heaven and hell, for an example, touches based on each order of angel or each dimension, with Michael the Archangel ruling, I believe it's the 7th one. But I mean, even if you get into the name of the angel or the being and you go back centuries, for an example, today in Hebrewism, the Hebrew term of Michael means he who is like God. He's the prince. Okay, go back 500 years ago to cuneiform. He's known as the soul collector, the collector of souls. Okay, you go back into Sanskrit. His name means face of love. The same thing can be done in demonology. When you get into, say, Belial, you have Belial, the leader of the sons of light and daughters of darkness, versus Michael, the leader of the sons of light, sons and daughters of light. This goes back to the scroll of Amram in the Dead Sea Scrolls. You get into today, 500 years ago, he's known as a king. Today, he's known as not only a king, but he's also associated with the 4 crowned princes of hell. Okay. According to E.A. Coetting, he is not only one of the the kings of persuasion within the 9 kings of the Goetia, but he is also associated with the gatekeepers as well. So he's not only a king, but he's a gatekeeper. Okay. So you can see how things change over time. And you can see where necromancy was originally associated with witchcraft and associated with shamanism. Okay. So you can see where all of this is going. Herbalism, alchemy, necromancy, chiromancy, the spiritualism, the realms, the demonolatry, getting into the Greek term of daemon, is demons are much like the divas, the demis or the diva, you know, which some are good and others are evil. Some are beneficial to mankind, whereas others are baneful to them. You know what I'm saying? The Coco Daemon is obviously going to be somebody that, a being that is harmful to humanity. Whereas the daemon itself is good. So I mean, no matter what belief structure, no matter what pantheon you're in, you're going to see it. You're going to see this duality. You're going to see this conflict. But the necromancer is not concerned with that type of thing. The necromancer is more concerned with the death energies, communing with the dead, learning from them, and such. So I think this would be a good place to end this video. I hope it's been educational. I hope it's been enlightening. You can always get in touch with me and ask questions. You could always get into, follow me here and on Facebook. It's up to you. I don't really mind. I do make myself available to the public. I do back up my sources. of information as you've seen here. So let the haters hate and let the likers like. It's up to you. But with that said, this dark sorcerer, this traditional Satanist, this black magician, necromancer is out. Hope it's been enlightening, inspirational, and educational. Agios Satanas. Have a good one.